So today I'm going to show you how to play giant steps, one of the most intimidating tunes in jazz, without any hacks or tricks. And while it's a tough nut to crack, I'll show you why it actually comes down to just two short chord progressions, and you can focus your energies on those and getting them fast and fluent. Welcome to Jazz Guitar Scrapbook. Please feel free to like, subscribe and terrorise an intermediate level jam session of your choice. No, please don't do that. Okay, so let's identify what's hard about giant steps. Okay, so the tempo, 290 beats a minute, and the original Coltrane recording, that's pretty fast. Although fast tempos are tricky, especially, as it requires technique and so on to play eighth notes. It's not actually the thing that's uniquely difficult about giant steps. So things like Donnelly, rhythm changes are all often played fast and they've got lots of notes and all the rest of it. And those can be challenging, but in those tunes you can more or less stay in the same key. So you can play quite melodically within a key and it's not going to go too wrong. With giant steps, you really can't do that because it moves between three different keys, for instance, in the first four bars. It goes from B, and then it goes to G, and then E flat, and then back to G again, right? So it modulates very rapidly, and that makes it tricky. Now, my assumption is that you know how to play 2-5-1s. If you don't, please go and learn how to do that, because you shouldn't be trying giant steps unless you can do that already. It's kind of a prerequisite for being able to solo on this tune, and there's loads of videos on that sort of thing, right? Beyond that, there is a particular bit which is especially a challenge, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So let's drill down into it a little further. I'm going to invoke a little concept from Hal Galper, which is forward motion. There's a video about it which will appear above me if you want to check that out. And the idea of this, to just recap quickly, is that we basically play into the one of the bar. So the phrase doesn't start at one. There's usually a pickup or a sort of an accrusis, if you want to be fancy, coming into that. And this counts for the actual form of the tune. So if you look at the first chord of the tune, it's B major, right? So what comes before that? Well, obviously, as it's written, nothing. But if we're playing it around and around, you need to look at the last bar of the tune. And you'll see that it's C sharp minor, F sharp 7, right? And that's what you usually hear before the B major. So the tune sort of starts on the penultimate, or the last bar even, of the previous repetition of the form, rather than on the one of that repetition. So using that logic, you can see that there's a 2-5-1 in B major that leads into the first beat of the first bar. And if we go through the rest of the tune, you can see that there's 2-5-1s that are broken up across the line in a similar sort of way, which makes them a little harder to spot if you're not used to looking out for that sort of thing. So you've got A minor, D7, G, for instance, F minor, B flat 7, E flat major, and so on. I have identified two challenging sections here which aren't 2-5-1s. And these are both so-called Coltrane cycles. You notice that they're both sort of 5-1 progressions moving to different keys. These are challenging for most people, right? And they're also the backbone of many Coltrane compositions of the era, like 26-2, Satellite, Countdown, there's reharmonization of body and soul, so on and so forth, right? So it's a good thing to learn. So these progressions are D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, and B flat 7, E flat major, F sharp 7, B major. And it's these progressions which you should target and focus on when practicing giant steps. Do it slowly. Everything here works both slowly and fast. So we often spend a lot of time talking about weird and exotic note choices over chords in jazz. For instance, upper extensions, 9ths, 11ths, 13ths, weird scales, and so on and so forth. But actually, if the chord progression is already a bit weird and unusual, one of the strongest things you can do is simply outline chord tones over the top of it. So one of the simplest ways we can do that is simply by using, on the dominant chords, dominant sevenths, and on the major chords, major triads. So, for instance, D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, we can play D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, right? Sounds nice. And if we just bookend it with the other bits of the progression, we'll have this sort of thing. So that's the simplest way you can deal with that. And it works, it's really effective. Hopefully you can hear how nice it sounds. So we can extend our means a little bit if we use these two simple substitutions. I think they sound great without using any funny notes, but they get us away slightly from that very plain outlining the changes that we did just now. So if you listen to the original recording of Giant Steps, you might notice that Paul Chambers is kind of playing just whole tones descending on the bass. 2, 5, do, 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 like that, right? And if we harmonise that on the guitar, we can just use alternating major and minor chords. And then 2, 5, 1. Do it again. So if you want to turn this into a soloing concept, we just alternate major and minor triads. And this is the basis of the melody for 26-2. So let's do that. So B major, A minor, G major, F minor, sorry, E flat major, and then 2, 5, 1 into G major, and then we do the same thing again. So we're going F minor, E flat major, C sharp minor, B major, right? Okay, and that sounds pretty nice, I think. So another, I think, quite guitaristic substitution is if we use the so-called flat 7 sub, where we put the 4 chord in for the 5. So instead of playing D7, we play C major. And instead of playing B flat 7, we play A flat major. And instead of playing F sharp 7, we play E major. And if we put that together, we get sort of B major, C major, G, A flat, E flat major. And this isn't really a hack, although it does flow really well on guitar. And we get 2, 5, 1 into G major, then G to A flat to E flat to E to B. It sounds smooth, right? A little bit less functional because we don't have the obvious dominant to tonic relationship there. So an obvious question is, how does Coltrane himself actually do this? And the answer is that famously he uses highly modular little bits of language, usually 4 notes long or something, and then he chains these together into longer lines. And if you look at the transcription, he actually does this through the chord progression pretty much as I've shown in this video so far. He doesn't just use arpeggios and scales though, he uses some other little bits and pieces which I'll talk about now. I have a full collection of these different ideas in the included worksheet PDF, which a link is available in the description. But for now I'm just going to talk about 2 bits. So the first one is quite well known. This is the 1, 2, 3, 5 tetrachord, so called because it's 4 notes. This basically allows you to outline any major or dominant chord. Again, it's a little bit like an arpeggio, it's just a very obvious way to do it. Barry Harris taught this kind of stuff, by the way, as well. It's known that Coltrane visited Barry Harris in Detroit, possibly because both Paul Chambers and Tommy Flanagan, who are both on the original recording of Giant Steps, were students of Barry Harris. We're going to start off with D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat, and we can do it like this. So D7 here, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5. I'll do that quickly. It sort of articulates that chord progression in a very clear way, just like arpeggios. And then we can do the same thing for here. So it's this. And we're not limited to playing those notes in that order, however. I've got a little bit more information on that in my Adam Rogers Plays Inner Urge video, which a link will appear above. So go and watch that if you want to find out more about that. And it's been covered quite a bit for Giant Steps. However, the next phrase I think is really nice, and I haven't heard discussed quite so much, and that's sort of a bebop scale sort of thing, or a Barry Harris added note scale thing. So we're going on D7, for instance, we go around from the D, chromatically down to C, and then we jump up to the E. Again, it's 4 notes. And that only works on the dominant. Put it on the, that's on D7, we can put it on the B flat 7. We can also put it on the F sharp, you know, various positions, you know, or it's good to practice all of these. And then we can link that up with the 1, 2, 3, 5 or 5, 3, 2, 1. So we're going to take this little bebop idea and attach it to a descending 5, 3, 2, 1. So that's a tetrachord thing flipped upside down. The bebop thing only works on the dominant chord. So for D it's this. Going up to the E. And then we have the descending 5, 3, 2, 1 on the G major. So B is all you and we can do the same thing here. We do the same thing on B. So you want to start building up a knowledge of where these things are all over the fretboard. You want to start building up a knowledge of where these things are all over the fretboard, and then it can allow you to play really smoothly through the chord progression. Now there's a whole bunch of different fragments, as I've mentioned in the handout, so if you go and look at those, you can start to build your own lines, and of course listen to how Trane does it. Now I'd like to show you a couple of Barry Harris strategies for dealing with giant steps. This is using a concept that Barry had, which was letting the dominant dominate. So instead of just playing what we were doing before, D7, G major, B flat 7, E flat major, we're actually just going to go D7, B flat 7. And as we're using something called the dominant scale, which is basically the same as the Mixolydian, the D7 and G major scale have the same pitches, the same notes, and the same is true of B flat 7 and E flat major. So if we just play the scales, we go up to the 7th and down again. Timing is slightly funky. We're starting off in the middle of the bar with the D7 after 2 beats of B major. So it goes 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, and then we go 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and we get a little bit longer on the second one, right? And then we can do the same thing here. So 1, 2, and then we go 1, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, and then 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, you know. And that's not particularly interesting sounding, but when it starts to be cool is when we start to do a descending scale with the added notes. So the simplest variety of this is known as a dominant bebop scale in mainstream jazz education. That's not what Barry Harris called it, but we'll go with that for the minute. And this is what happens when you take our basic dominant or Mixolydian scale and we add in a note, a half step usually, between the 1 and the flat 7. It sounds like this. For D, right? For D7. This is common throughout. Mostly are found in saxophone solos. I seem to really like these scales. And part of the reason is I think it works out, you know, Barry Harris always used to say it comes out right. So it makes it easier to join onto other stuff. So if we just play 1, 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and moves directly to the B flat. 1 and 2 and 3. Oh, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 4. We're adding in the extra note. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay. Now I think it sounds slightly better if we don't add in the extra half step in the second scale, in the B flat scale. So we go 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 2. And if we like, we can add something on the end to make it a little bit more interesting. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and I like a little E flat major chord there, or arpeggio, major 7th, right? So 1, 2. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing in B flat 7 going to F sharp 7. So it's the same thing, but we transpose it. So that gives us a lot of smoothness. smooth way of navigating those chord changes. The last thing we can do is we can take this idea and start to use some of our Barry Harris dominant language. Now, if you haven't done the Barry Harris system, this is what we spend quite a lot of our time doing, taking the dominant scale and using half steps and different patterns to turn it into bebop language. And I'd highly recommend that you look into that if this interests you. I do have a video which acts as an introduction to this stuff, so that'll appear above. But for today, I'm just going to use this sort of boilerplate lick that I always use. So what is that? That's going down from 1 to flat 7, up a triad, so the E triad in this case. Can also be thought of as a pivot, so-called pivot. Pivot C major 7th, and then down the scale. And then we go. I think that sounds pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.